This episode contains graphic descriptions of violence and strong language that may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Now, just a heads up, before we begin this episode, Ricky was actually recording from his iPhone, so the audio may sound a little different than usual. We greatly appreciate your patience and understanding, and we are so glad that you're tuning in.
My name is Ashley.
And I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad. At 6:43 a.m. on Tuesday, May 5th of 2009, Detective Justin Barlow's phone rang, and on the other end was his neighbor, Christopher Coleman, sounding anxious. He had just returned from the gym and couldn't get his wife, Sheri, to answer the phone. Something wasn't right. That call would set off an investigation that would uncover one of the most chilling family tragedies in Columbia, Illinois. A small town located near St. Louis, Missouri. The family of four, Chris Coleman, Sheri, who were both high school sweethearts, and their two sons, 9-year-old Gavin and 11-year-old Garrett, were living in a 2-story house located in a suburban neighborhood. When Detective Barlow received this call, he was well aware of this family receiving death threats in the past that were increasingly getting more and more worrisome. These threats were to kill Chris's family, apparently because of Chris's job. And well, it was scary because he just so happened to be living in the same neighborhood within view of the Coleman's home. Chris Coleman, a former Marine and pastor's son, was employed as a director of security for Joyce Meyer Ministries, or JMM, an internationally renowned Christian ministry headquartered in Missouri. Chris had reported the multiple threats that his family and him received to the Columbia Police Department. These came in the mail, so whoever sent these knew where he lived. They knew he had a family. They also knew where he worked because he was getting threats through his work email. So once he received this concerning call, the neighbor/detective Barlow decided to go check on the family, and he also reached out to the police department requesting another officer to go with him. When Detective Barlow and another officer got to the house, they rang the doorbell a few times, but no one answered the door. They went around the back and oddly found a basement window wide open. The screen to the window was found leaning against a table and patio chairs, which appeared to be an access point for someone who could have removed it to break in without making a sound. They tried to call out for Sheri while cautiously peering in through the opened window to see if anyone was home, but there was no response. It was quiet, and so they climbed in. No one was in the basement area. For having 2 younger kids in the house, it was pretty quiet. As they climbed the stairs, the scene became even more unsettling. Red spray-painted messages dripping with malice were scrawled haphazardly across the walls. The words weren't just offensive. They were violent. They said, "Fuck you. I'm always watching. Punished. Bitch." The rage behind them was palpable, and the message cut through the once loving home like a knife. Family photos that were hanging on the wall, once a proud display of this happy family of 4, including 2 younger boys who would have been in grade school, were defaced by the angry scrawl. The sight sent a chilling message. Whoever did this had dark intentions to obliterate this family. The officers didn't need to say it aloud. They knew something unspeakably horrific had taken place. Hearing the garage door opening and realizing it was Chris arriving home, the officers directed their attention to order him to stay outside while they kept searching the home. Another officer arrived onto the scene. The search continued throughout the house. They were looking for the family, but they were also cautious that someone unwanted could be hiding inside. No one was on the first floor, and so they made their way to the top of the stairs, where, to their left, in the master bedroom, lying face down on the bed, naked, was Sheri. She didn't have a pulse. Her two sons, Garrett and Gavin, were also in their rooms, and they were found deceased as well. Gavin was lying on his bed, lifeless. His sheets were coated in red spray paint. Written were the words, "Fuck you." Garrett's room also had spray paint, and it was described as a circle pattern drawn, and it was noticed that Garrett had spray paint on his hand and his arm. All three family members were callously strangled to death with a ligature. The police described that their skin was tough and thick, and even was discolored, indicating that they had been murdered and left there for quite some time. Whoever did this showed no respect or care for this family at all. The scene was deeply upsetting, and having to share the news with Chris, the father, the husband, that his wife and two sons had been murdered was incredibly difficult. It was a heartbreaking moment that no one should ever have to experience.
Not only did something so tragic happen, someone had the audacity to go around and destroy the house and even paint on the boy.
Yeah.
That's horrible. I mean, the way the room appeared when you described it was something like an abandoned building where squatters had graffitied the walls or something.
No, this is like a suburban neighborhood.
Right.
Like this is a beautiful home. It was actually a newer style home, like a modern home, white siding, black shutters, like driveway, the perfect American family home.
Right. So you said this could have all been related to Chris's job. So they were sending him messages to his work email, that type of thing. What did he do again? It was like security?
Yeah, so he was head of security at Joyce Meyer Ministries. So Joyce Meyer Ministries is this huge Christian organization based in Missouri. You may have seen her on TV. She actually has a show called Enjoying Everyday Life, or maybe you've seen a video clip of her online. She's a very successful and well-known speaker, author, and her messages focus around her real-life struggles and how faith can help you overcome them. Her ministry also helps people around the world by providing food, medical aid, and disaster relief. So this is like a big organization that he works for, very successful Christian organization. And Chris, like I said, he was head of security, making around $100,000 a year. His role involved overseeing the safety and security of Joyce Meyer, her family, and the ministry operations.
Now, are we sure he wasn't part of something else, like a gambling problem or the mafia, or like owed someone a bunch of money? Because this feels almost like blackmail-ish, right?
I mean, does.
They're reaching out to him through mail, physical mail, work email, like that type of stuff. Like they're really pushing into this guy. I mean, is this something where they took out his family because of something?
Well, it's really interesting, actually. And in order to paint a picture as to what happened, all of the pieces of the puzzle had to be found, and then they would have to be pieced together. So one of the first things that was noticed by the police was that there were no signs of forced entry. The basement window, like we said, was left open. The only thing was that the screen was popped out, leaning on the outdoor furniture.
It's like John Benet Ramsey type stuff.
Yeah. Now, according to the detectives, when they found Sheri and her two sons dead in the family home, Detective Barlow knelt down next to Chris, who was sitting on the ground, and gave him the devastating news that his family didn't make it, that his family was gone.
And how did he react?
Well, once he heard this horrible news, according to the police, he was sitting on the ground. He didn't have much to say about the whole thing, and he just cried. He didn't ask what happened. He did ask what happened, but things felt a little off. He was more calm than shocked or worried. He didn't ask any other questions. And it was also reported by the officers that he didn't try to get into the house. He didn't fight with them to see them. There was no urgency in his demeanor. However, the police did tell him not to go inside. They even shut the garage door to keep him from accessing the inside of the home.
Yeah, that's strange. I know there's no specific way that you should act in times like this, but I would personally be freaking out. Like, I would have to see you guys. I would have to know exactly what happened. I would be in shock.
Yeah, like you said, there's no real way to say this is how you need to act. But it did stand out to officers. It just felt off, like they were expecting like a little bit more. It just wasn't like a real reaction.
Right.
Now, while the other two officers went back into the house, the third officer, Peyton, he stayed back with Chris and reported that Chris needed to call work. And that same officer heard him call his father. He stood nearby while he talked on the phone. And eventually an ambulance came around 7 o'clock in the morning, and they escorted Chris to the back of the ambulance. The paramedic witnessed him crying when he approached the residence. That paramedic also later testified in court that there was spray paint messages on the walls, and the victims, Sheri, Garrett, and Gavin, were cold, stiff, and that although not trained in the field, from his experience as a paramedic, it appeared that rigor mortis had set in, which was a clear indication that the victims in the house were deceased. And with that being said, CPR was not performed. He also added that from his experience, most bodies that have rigor mortis have been down for a while. Chris was then transported to the police station by the ambulance. After an extensive autopsy, which was performed on all three victims to try to narrow down the cause of death and other details like the time of death. Now, for most of us, generally speaking, we're pretty much aware that rigor mortis sets in a few hours after death. According to the National Library of Medicine, and we'll provide the link, rigor mortis typically begins approximately 2 hours after death, and it starts in the muscles of the face and gradually progresses to the limbs over the next several hours, becoming fully established between 6 to 8 hours post-mortem. It remains for an additional 12 hours, lasting for a total of approximately 24 hours after death. And after this point, the body begins to break down and decompose, causing the stiffness to dissipate. A pathologist determined the deaths to be approximately 6 to 8 hours prior to 11:04 a.m.
So, what time did he go to the gym? Because I'm assuming he has some type of alibi.
So, according to Chris, he left the house around 5:45 in the morning, and he stated that during that time, his wife was alive.
Okay.
So, and he also had his neighbor go check on his family about an hour after that. So 6:45 called
That's
him.
soon.
Yeah.
And then still no reply?
Still no reply from Sheri. But the neighbor was getting ready, and then during that time, he contacted the police department to have another officer come along with him. And yeah.
So what time did they actually discover the bodies when the police went into the house?
So according to the affidavit, the police arrived at the house, and they found all three dead at around 7:10 a.m. According to the forensics pathologist, this happened sometime around 3, definitely not after 5 a.m. So that's what he testified in court.
Right. So if Chris isn't guilty of anything, which is kind of seeming like he could be, this would have happened while he was home.
Most likely.
Well, if the science is
right. If the science is correct. Someone who is much more qualified to provide that information is the chief forensics pathologist for the New York State Police, Dr. Michael Baden, who was a second forensic pathologist hired for this case to get a second opinion. He testified in court, and he tells how there is a number of ways you can determine the time of death. This is the same chief forensic pathologist in the late 1970s for the U.S. Congress Select Committee on Assassinations. So he looked into the deaths of President John F. Kennedy and Reverend Martin Luther King. So with over 45 years of work, over 20,000 autopsies under his belt, he explained that the three main methods, rigor mortis, stiffening of the body, lividity, which is a sign of death that occurs when blood settles in the lower parts of the body after death, causing a discoloration of the skin, and also body temperature. These things, depending upon a number of different things like environmental factors being thrown in there, can determine the time of death. He also noted that stomach contents can help you if you know the last meal time, and analyzing eye fluid for potassium levels can provide additional clues. He was contacted in May of 2009 for his expert opinion on the victim's time of death.
That's pretty crazy, though.
Yeah.
Knowing what they ate, and then, I guess going through the stomach contents, you could find those things, and then...
There's a crazy science to it. It's very interesting, but also very complicated at the same time. So by looking at the hundreds of crime scene photos and autopsy photos, as well as the police reports and the other forensic pathologist reports, he determined that it appeared rigor mortis and lividity were present. Now, the photos of the crime scene and of the bodies were taken at approximately 11 o'clock in the morning, so he had to counter for that. He also made the determination that the 31-year-old mother of two, Sheri, was strangled first, being that some of her strands of hair were on Gavin, who was the next victim and the youngest of the family at 9 years old. Then following Garrett, who was 11 years old at the time of his death. It also was believed that this same cord was used to strangle all three family members. He made his expert opinion that the three deaths occurred before 3 a.m., noting that it was definitely before 5 a.m., but probably near 3 a.m. So let's rewind to 4 months earlier. Back in January of 2009, Officer Payton had responded to a report from the family after they discovered a threatening letter in their mailbox. And this letter stated, "Fuck you. Deny your God publicly or else. No more opportunities. Time is running out for you and your family. Have a good time in India, motherfucker."
Wow. So this almost sounds more like a hate crime now.
It could be, yeah. Against the ministry, against...
religion or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this had been going on, though, for almost 4 months?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Now, naturally, the police, they wanted to talk to Chris because, after all, he's the only family member left alive. And according to his story, his family was murdered while he was at the gym during the early morning hours, sometime between 5:45 and 6:45 in the morning. Chris claimed that he wasn't home when it happened. He also stated that when he left the house at 5:45 a.m., his wife was still alive. The police were also aware of the numerous threats the family had been receiving.
So one thing to point out here, though, the spray paint at the crime scene, it does seem to reflect what was sent in those emails and those letters, that type of stuff.
Yeah, like a lot of hate, a lot of anger, a lot of FUs, a lot of I'm always watching, Yeah, good point. Now, even before the interview, while they were still at the house, an officer noticed that he had scratches on his arm, and he asked him what those were all about. During the recorded interview at the station, when he is sitting in the interview room with the detective, he asked for something to cover up with because he was cold. The detective felt like this was strange because it really wasn't cold in there at all. So it's believed that he was trying to hide these scratches for whatever reason. He explained that one set of scratches was a few days old, though he couldn't really recall how exactly he got them. He thought maybe it happened while he was on the roof adjusting the satellite dish. The other scratch came from him hitting his arm against the gurney in the ambulance after his family was found. Initially, he claimed that his marriage was good, but later he admitted that they had experienced some issues towards the end of 2008. However, he said that they were working on things through counseling. Yeah, Now, about 4 hours into this interview, the officer asked Chris, if he knows how his family was killed. And he said he didn't know. One point in the interview, the two officers were interviewing Chris and they ended up walking out. And on camera, Chris is seen taking a look at the officers' notes. Chris also agreed to provide bodily and handwriting samples. It was about 25 minutes into the process when Chris expressed that he was tired of writing, and so the police agreed to allow him to stop. He handed over his clothes and computer, granting the police permission to examine his mail and conduct a thorough search of his house and his car. Chris was on their radar for sure as a potential suspect, despite the threats. It became even more apparent when they opened up the doors to his personal and secret life. Chris was having an affair with a woman named Tara. An officer with experience and training in computer forensics and data analyzed Chris Coleman's cell phone, laptops, computers, and thumb drives that were stored inside the home, uncovering several hundred videos and pictures that suggested Chris and Tara were involved in a very sexual relationship. The officer found hundreds of explicit photos and videos, some of which were censored and shown in court to provide evidence of Chris and Tara's sexual relationship. Chris also kept notes on Tara in his phone. There was a Christmas list, which included a promise ring, even another list containing Tara's information like her birthday, her height, her clothing sizes, and he kept these things to buy her things. He had a list for her favorite perfume and even things that she disliked, like certain foods and certain sport teams. One note read, "Our daughter's name, Zoe Lynn Coleman." And get this, Tara just so happened to be Sheri's best friend in high school, and they stayed in touch.
Her husband also stayed in touch.
Yeah. And it was when Chris went to a JMM conference for work in November of 2008 that was held in Florida, which this is where Tara lived. And according to Tara, Sheri told her that she should go to the conference because her husband will be there. And that's how it all started. From there, Chris and Tara talked on the phone and texted constantly, and they hooked up a month later at a hotel when he had to make another trip to Florida for work. Later, they met up in Arizona and Hawaii while Chris was traveling for work. Supposedly, the plan was for Chris to divorce Sheri, then marry Tara and move her to Illinois. They even got matching promise rings, and during the trial, Tara was wearing hers.
So this is not adding up well for Chris.
Not at all. And this was all happening behind Sheri's back while she was being an amazing mom to her kids. Now, according to Tara, Chris had told her that he talked with an attorney about getting a divorce. He was getting the divorce papers all prepared and things were getting close. He was scheduled to pick up these papers on Monday, May 4th, 2009. Once he would receive those, he would give them to Sheri and ask for a divorce. However, apparently there was an error on the papers. Sheri's name was spelled wrong, and so that put a wrench in the plan, delaying it for one more day. And he was expecting to get the papers the next day on May 5th. And to celebrate this whole thing, the divorce and their new life together, Chris had purchased tickets to go on a cruise to St. Thomas in June with Tara. Now, Tara testified that she texted Chris constantly on May 4th, but didn't have any communication the next morning, which was the day that Sheri and her sons were murdered. The first she heard about these murders was from Chris's father, who called her around 10 o'clock in the morning to tell her that Sheri and the boys had been murdered.
Wait, Chris's father called Tara?
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah, I couldn't find out if he knew that they had some sort of relationship or something, or maybe Chris said, "Hey, can you call up Sheri's friend, Tara?" I'm not sure. But it is interesting. Now, from that point on, the communication seemed to be pretty steady between the two. They both texted during the times that they were being interviewed by the police. Tara was also made aware that there were 4 threatening letters that Chris and his family received. When the police traveled to Florida to go speak with Tara, Tara told Chris, "Hey, the police are here. They want to interview me." And his response was, "Oh, really? That's interesting." Now, where Chris worked, JMM. Sheri, she used to work there a few years ago, but at some point she stopped working there. She actually had a few friends who she used to work with and kept in contact with on pretty much a regular basis. Sheri would bring up with them how Chris wanted a divorce because her and the kids were in the way of him following his destiny and what God wanted him to do, and they were in the way of his career. In total, 5 witnesses testified about Sheri's statements to them concerning the state of her marriage and Chris's desire for a divorce. Another friend of Sheri's testified that Chris had beat her up, but didn't go into detail. And it became known even to Joyce Meyer herself, the face of JMM. She knew that Chris and his wife, Sheri, were having marital problems and recommended marriage counseling within JMM. And from what she knew, the counseling was going very well. Joyce also was made aware of the number of threats that he was receiving and stated that out of all of the other 900 different employees, no one else was receiving direct threats, just Chris. On Friday, November 14th of 2008, a few employees who work for JMM, including Chris, received an email with the subject line reading, "Fuck Chris's family. They are dead." The email stated, "I'm sure this will make it to someone in the company. If you jackasses are like any other company, this will be someone's account. Pass this on to Chris. Tell Joyce to stop preaching the bullshit or Chris's family will die. If I can't get Joyce, then I'll go to somebody close to her. And if I can't get to him, then I will kill his wife and kids. I know Joyce's schedule, so then I know Chris's schedule. If Joyce doesn't quit preaching the bullshit, then they will die." And this email went on. It said, "During the Houston conference, I will kill them all in their sleep. If I don't hit there, then I will kill them during the book tour for the trip to India. I know where he lives, and I know they're alone. Fuck them all, and they will all die soon. Tell that motherfucker next time to let me talk to Joyce. She needs to hear what I have to say, and now she will."
So, assuming that all of these threats were made by Chris, this is quite the setup.
Yeah.
It's just, I guess it's a little baseless, though, being that, like Joyce said, there's 900 employees and no one else is getting threats like this.
Just Chris and his family.
Which makes it suspicious.
Yeah. Now, on Saturday, November 15th of 2008, another email was sent to 2 others within the company and Chris's work email for JMM, and it said, "I know you all got my fucking email. You think I'm full of shit. Just wait. I will shoot their asses with my .40. Kill them all. I'm so sick of bitches like her taking everybody's cash so she can fly her jet and pamper her white ass. Fuck you all. Tell Chris I will kill them. He has no idea when, but it will happen." So according to Joyce Meyer Ministries legal defense, they had notified the police, but there wasn't like this in-depth investigation like there was after the murders. Within the company, suspicions began to arise about a possible affair between Chris and another woman, and if this were true, this could have led to Chris's termination, as adultery conflicted with the church's beliefs, and others had been let go for similar reasons in the past. The suspicions were heightened when Chris brought up a personal question to a colleague. He asked whether explicit photos sent by his wife could potentially become accessible to others within the company. Although the answer was no, the inquiry itself raised eyebrows because at the same time, it was common knowledge among a handful of employees that Chris and his wife were going through marital struggles. Another red flag was the unusually high charges on Chris's cell phone bill, especially when he traveled outside the U.S. A closer look at his phone records revealed a significant number of calls and text messages, both incoming and outgoing, to a single Florida phone number. And this further fueled the speculation. Someone actually called this number and heard it was a female voice on the other end. Now, we have all of these witness testimonies, but what is really telling is what the technology tells. So, as far as the cell phone records, on this day, the family was murdered. Now, we have all of these witness testimonies, but what really is telling is what the technology tells. So as far as the cell phone records, on the day that this family was murdered, Chris's cell phone did make 6 calls outgoing starting at 5:45 a.m., which was right around the time that he said he left the house. And this aligns with his statement that he called Sheri a number of times to wake her up to get the kids up to get ready for school. The officer who is trained in computer forensics and data was provided the confirmation about who was sending these threatening emails to Chris from a Google Gmail account titled destroychris@gmail.com.
Okay, so again, 900 employees, and this email is specifically for him.
Yeah, destroy Chris. Someone had it out for Chris. Now, this same officer determined that the same IP address that created the account was used to send the threats. There were 8 emails that were created under that account, and 7 of those emails were actually sent out. The 8th email was never sent out. The officer did a lot of investigative work, even getting the details of when this account was created, which was at 8:19 p.m. on November 14th of 2008, and its exact location being on the defendant's Dell laptop computer, which was found inside of his home.
Wow, you gotta love technology. But at the same time, he could have just used a VPN and he would have been fine.
Yep, the digital breadcrumbs told a story even if he didn't.
Honestly, this dude was probably like, hey, I deleted my history.
So this whole time, Chris is the one making these threats. Jaw-dropping. It like screams Scooby-Doo villain vibes to me. I don't know why, but it's like over the top, and these emails are kind of like crazy, like so angry at Chris and so angry, and it's just like he's been with the company for a really long time.
Right, like everything's doomed from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame that he actually killed his family, but it's also like ridiculous that he tried to pull something off like this, like writing these threats through a work email, and it's so stupid.
Right. And obviously he didn't understand technology at all because he just blatantly created these emails. Like there's so many other ways you could have gone about it. Like, yes, you could have used like VPN or something like that, but you also could have went to like a library or used someone else's computer or done something. But he just like straight up uses his work computer, most likely at his home or at work, which would have some type of IP address.
Right.
It's just crazy. It's like you said, it's like Scooby-Doo. We look at the guy the whole episode, and then at the end we pull off his mask.
Like, it was you this whole time. We knew it, but we didn't really know. But what gets me is the Google Gmail account name, destroychris@gmail.com.
Pretty unoriginal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would have got away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
More like meddling cops.
Yeah, something like that. Honestly, I think our brains are only going there because our son is watching Scooby-Doo nonstop every day.
It was like all of our first true crime. I mean, it wasn't true crime, but it was like all of our first like mystery, interest. So it was mine anyways.
I remember they came out with a movie and it had a punchline. It was like, this time the monsters are real. And I was like, holy cow.
My gosh, they are.
Oh no, this changes everything.
Now, there were a few other things that were interesting, like one of Chris Coleman's credit cards that were found inside of his home that was investigated, and it found that a can of apple red Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch spray paint was purchased on February 9th of 2009. And if you remember that they took samples of Chris's handwriting during his interview with the police, and they examined it very closely and found some similarities with some letters, although it was a bit of a challenge to say 100% that it was a match. There was an extensive investigation in this as well, which developed into a challenge to determine if he was right-handed or if he was left-handed, or was it more than one person? And it all appeared to be a disguised handwriting technique. That's what he determined. Because there was a mix of capital letters and small letters mixed with cursive and printing. I couldn't imagine doing this as a job, honestly. I feel like my eyes would be rolling in the back of my head. And I'm sure some cases would be easier than others, but it would be difficult in this situation because they're dealing with spray paint and not handwriting. And if they were disguising their handwriting, it would just make it even more difficult.
I'm actually surprised they didn't make him do samples of spray paint, right? Like writing on the wall, that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean...
Because it's a different motion completely than actually like sitting down and holding a pencil or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there was a reason why they didn't. I'm not sure. Another thing that was interesting was a representative from MI Windows and Doors, that's spelled MI for those of you who would like to know, located in Pennsylvania, who conducts certification testing for all of their products, testified about the Coleman's basement window. This window featured a forced entry resistance plate designed to prevent unauthorized opening when locked. So if someone had attempted to force the window open, visible damage would have occurred. However, the Coleman's window showed no signs of damage or forced entry, indicating that it had not been tampered with.
The fact that the window was left unlocked and was easy to access like that is kind of surprising to me because they had these threats, right? So obviously their lives are potentially in danger. They said a lot of really threatening things in those letters. Like, wouldn't you be looking into keeping the house locked up, safe, being aware of those types of things in general? I mean, if it were me, I think I would probably get like surveillance cameras and everything.
Yeah. I mean, you don't really know how serious they are with these threats because it's like, well, this is like some angry guy. I mean...
Yeah, I get that.
So to recap, when Chris, he called his neighbor who just so happened to be a detective, Detective Barlow, at 6:43 a.m., he said that he was on his way home from Gold's Gym in South County, Missouri, and that he would be home in about 5 minutes. He was crossing the Jefferson Barracks Bridge from Missouri into Illinois, and he tried to call his wife several times to get the kids up, but she was not answering the phone, and he was beginning to worry. Detective Barlow, who had been asleep, who was woken up by this call, got up, got dressed, called the police department, asked for a uniformed officer to meet him at the Coleman residence to check on his family. Now, prior to this happening, because of all of the threats that were happening to this family, Detective Barlow actually installed a security camera and it was pointed toward the Coleman residence. It was actually located in his 5-year-old son's bedroom, pointed out of his window. And it captured Chris leaving the house at 5:43 a.m., which would have been the time that he would have left for the gym. And it also showed Detective Barlow arriving at his residence at 6:51 a.m. And the footage also shows defendant returning home at 6:56 a.m., marking that it took Chris 13 minutes to get from the bridge to where he told Barlow that he was 5 minutes from his home. So 13 minutes, not 5 minutes. And Barlow testified that the trip normally takes about 7 minutes, although it's a small inconsistency, it still is something that popped out to him.
Yeah, that makes sense. It could have been the fact that Chris wanted the police to arrive at the house before he did, though.
Yeah.
So maybe
that's true.
Over or wasted some time, something like that. So they had the security camera. Did Chris know about this camera?
I think he knew about it. I think he actually got it approved to put the camera and point it in towards his house.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
I mean, that makes sense, like knowing about it. Now, did they see anything else, like another vehicle, anything suspicious, like that type of stuff?
Nothing suspicious. The officers even took a look around the neighborhood. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary either. Also, just to add, Justin Barlow testified that he never actually talked to Chris. And the first time that Chris reached out to the Columbia Police Department was on November 14th of 2008, after he received a threatening email at his work. The Columbia Police agreed to patrol around the Coleman residence. Then on January 2nd of 2009, there was a threatening letter that the Colemans received in the mail. Then another on April 27th of 2009 that contained a warning to Chris stating, Stop traveling and stop carrying on with this fake religious life of stealing people's money. This is the last warning. Your worst nightmare is about to happen.
So Chris had a lot of hatred built up against this organization. Maybe not religion in general, but at least for who he's working for.
Yeah, definitely. It seemed like that was really what was happening. Now, after this incident, this is when the detective felt that the threats, they were getting more and more intense. And then Barlow got approval to point the security camera towards the Coleman residence that was mounted in his 5-year-old son's bedroom window, pointing out. This was installed the next day after this threat happened.
Geez, in this situation, the camera should have been pointing inside.
Right. So looking at everything big picture, it was pieced together that Chris is in this tight situation. He's facing the risk of losing his $100,000 per year job if he was caught having an affair. Divorce obviously wasn't the answer, even though he was supposedly filing for divorce. And even a number of people came forward with the same story that Sheri was telling people he wanted a divorce, all because she was in the way, and their kids were in the way.
Which is pretty telling.
Yeah. Now, the evidence showed that the defendant started an affair with Tara in November of 2008, which quickly became serious. Like we said, they were even talking about marriage and thinking of baby names. One thing that really stands out about this case is how much work goes into investigating a crime involving technology. It's nothing like the simpler, more straightforward cases from the 70s. The amount of detail and effort is just incredible. And personally, reading through the affidavit was a complete eye-opener. It just showed me how complex these investigations get. And with technology consistently improving, it's becoming harder and harder for someone to commit a crime and actually get away with it, which is honestly amazing. So although this case against Chris Coleman had an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence, there was also, as the defense stated, a lack of DNA evidence. Chris's DNA wasn't 100% confirmed to be the DNA under Sheri's nails. And on top of that, he lived there, so his DNA would be in the house, naturally. There was no confession or eyewitness testimony. However, based on a very knowledgeable forensics pathologist who has a ton of experience, along with the timeline of events, puts Chris inside the home when the family was murdered. This was enough evidence to allow the jury to find him guilty of 3 murders beyond a reasonable doubt. He was the one who created that email, which was the email that sent those threats. He was having this affair. He was looking to get divorced. The circumstantial evidence just outweighed the defense in this case entirely. The jury deliberated for approximately 15 hours over 2 days before reaching a verdict. On May 5th of 2011, exactly 2 years after the murders, they found Coleman guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of his wife, Sheri, and their 2 sons, Garrett and Gavin. Following the conviction, the sentencing phase was emotionally charged with prosecutors initially pushing for the death penalty. However, due to the Illinois abolition of capital punishment effective July 1st of 2011, the judge sentenced Coleman to 3 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. Coleman's attorneys have attempted to appeal his prison term, but the judges have upheld the conviction and life sentences. An evidentiary hearing was scheduled in March of 2019, but the judge denied an appeal for a new trial. As of now, Christopher Coleman, whose crimes were driven by greed, lust, selfishness, and an overwhelming sense of narcissism, is serving his sentence at Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin.
I'll never understand these family annihilator cases. The fact that he just wanted to be with somebody else, and the fact that he thought he had to kill his entire family to make that happen, will never make sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, someone who does that, like I said, is just narcissistic. Like, they're not seeing their family or their kids as like people. They're just things, like objects, like they're just in the way, as he even described to Sheri, you know?
Yeah.
It's like they're just in the way of his life and in the way of his, what he wants to do and his destiny.
Yeah. I no longer want these things.
Right.
I'm going to get rid of them. It's awful.
Ugh. It's so disgusting. I think this would be a good spot to end the episode because we don't have anything more to say.
That's true. But if you like Crime Salad and you're enjoying the show, make sure to check us out on Patreon.
And also, just a reminder, just throw away that old spring salad mix in the back of your fridge because it's looking pretty gross.
Honestly, if you didn't make the salad today, just throw it away.
You're just not going to make it. Just don't.
Even those little like single serve store-bought salads that you buy at like the grocery store, awful. Salad doesn't last 10 days.
But crime salad lasts forever.
It's true.
And that completes this week's episode. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening and be sure to tell a friend about Crime Salad.